Welcome to the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast, where we explore the spirituality of the Christian child through the method of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. I am your host, Carrie Mecki Lozano, with my dear friend Anna Hurdle as my co-host. Today, we invite Joann Terranova to speak with us about the introduction and chapter 1 of the religious potential of the child for the 6 to 12-year-old. Joann has been involved in Catechesis of the Good Shepherd since 1998, and she has served as a pastoral assistant for children's ministry in Catholic parishes. She helped begin the atrium at St. Michael Olympia in Washington, and she currently serves as a toddler catechist there. Her ministry as a formation leader in CGS began in 2007, and she is recognized to serve in level 1, 2, and 3. She also holds a bachelor's degree in religious studies and psychology, as well as a master's in adult Christian community development and a master's in pastoral studies with an emphasis in catechesis of the Good Shepherd. We hope you enjoy.
Hello. We welcome today catechist and formation leader Joann Terranova. Welcome, Joann.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Would you mind sharing with our listeners a little bit about your story, how you first encountered the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd?
So as I think about this, and I think about my time in catechesis, I say that answer of like when I got introduced to this keeps going early. As I learn more, it goes earlier and earlier. And just recently, I say that I reflect on my experience as a child in the church and what stands out for me. And one of my earliest experiences, I grew up in a parish that really was quick to embrace after Vatican II, like we're going to do religious education with preschoolers. And I have this memory of being in the basement of the old church, painting with yellow tempera paint and being deathly afraid that the adult-sized folding chair I was sitting in was going to swallow me up. And then my next church memory is of the dedication of this religious education building that was built when I'm about 4 years old at this time. And I am so impressed with this place because there are child-sized folding chairs and there is a child-sized toilet and a sink that I can reach. And it was like, I think that, part of my deep faith life is really related to that I felt a deep sense of belonging in the church as a very young person. And this last year, our region was celebrating its anniversary of our regional organization, and we kind of tried to do a deeper dive into like, how did this gift get here? And the earliest thing we can trace it to is a visit of E.M. Standing to Seattle University. And I was able to look at some of his lecture notes and stuff, and like the seed that he planted here. So I have this like kind of, I can't say who did what, but there was somebody in my parish who felt the need to order child-sized chairs and install a child-sized toilet. And I was like, is that directly related to E.M. Standing's visit to Seattle? I don't know, but it feels like you could connect those dots. And so, yeah, I think that my involvement in CGS, has always been around like trying to, like I was so spiritually hungry as a child that that hunger wasn't always met. And how, I can see how this, had this been offered to me in a full way as a child, it would have really satisfied my hunger in a deeper way.
I love that.
I love that too. I think it's interesting that you were painting with yellow paint, that you remember the
Yes.
yellow.
Yeah.
We always talk about that yellow being so important in our work. Well, I'm super excited about our conversation today. So we're going to be diving into the second edition of the religious potential of the child for the 6 to 12-year-old. And I find it really fascinating that this book came out significantly later within our work. The first edition came out in around 2002, I believe. I find that fascinating that it took a long time for us to have this in our hands. And so it is a true blessing. So Joann, I would love for us just to sit together as friends and kind of look at the introduction in chapter 1 of this book. There's so much amazing thing. I highlighted and starred so much. There's, especially in the introduction, there's so much in there that I was like, well, that whole paragraph is amazing. Well, that whole paragraph is amazing. Well, we could just read that. But I would love to hear your thoughts about the introduction in chapter 1. What did you get out of these?
Yeah. Can I back up just to like the so long waiting for this thing?
Yeah,
because it sparked in me a memory.
Yeah.
A memory of when I took level 2 training. Like, I think this book came out like in between the part 1 and part 2 of my course. And I just have this memory of Rebecca showing up for 1 or 2 days of the course and like reading paragraphs to us. But yeah, just that hunger for the book was so palpable. It's like, oh, it's so close, but it's not right here, right now. So, what I do want to say before, like I say, like the very first thing I have highlighted in my book is on the title page, is the subtitle. I think it would be so easy to miss because it doesn't appear on the cover. It just says a description of an experience. And I think like that stands out to me in such a way because I think it highlights that deep sense of humility that Sophia approached her work with. Here I'm just going to tell you what happened to me and a group of kids, right? Or she would say us, right? And then the other aspect is that it invites this invitation to, you want to take this journey too. You're invited to reflect on your experience. So anyway, I feel like that's part of the book that could be easy to be missed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember, Anna, you pointed that out to me. I hadn't noticed that until then.
I think what stood out for me in the introduction was the profound respect for the child and lifting up, that we tend to think about this as an adult. Like there's only one way to have a faith life or to talk religious stuff, and that's in our heads. It's in this adult perspective, but I think it's close to the end where I was noticing this. We're often intrigued by what's different, in part because it can teach us something, but this interest rarely extends to matters pertaining to the child. Prevailing attitudes to the child are bereft of that respectful attention, that curiositas of the investigative mind which is necessary to work and seeks to be scientific. The absence of this curiosity precludes a possibility of knowing the religious world of a human creature in the earliest phase of life.
Yeah, I have that part underlined. I think it really speaks into that humility that we talk about a lot with the adults, that, scientific mindset that Maria Montessori calls us to and that we continue within our work. The absence of this curiosity precludes the possibility of knowing the religious world of the human creature in the earliest phases of life. Mm-hmm. What I really found beautiful in this introduction was how she really emphasized that the religious needs of the 6 to 12-year-old is no less great or essential, right? She says that, I think sometimes we forget that. I think we talk, that golden age, like she referred to, that 0 to 6-year-old, but that doesn't mean that the 6 to 12-year-old is no less great or essential than that of the younger child. It's just different. She says their religious potential is no less strong. Rather, it is expressed through the new capacities of their own stage of development. I love that. They're just different. It's different.
And that their responses are documented to us and to the catechist through words, through their voice, through conversation. Whereas the younger children, we really looked at their artwork as a way to see what, to get a clue as to what sort of response was happening within the child.
Right. I think that's helpful, especially whenever you look at the examples in the back of the book and stuff, because I think what it does for us as the adults is it hones our eyes to look for what's already there. And she speaks about this in the chapter as well, that sometimes we can look at them with our adult lens, right? And if they aren't acting like adults, then we think that they don't have a religious capacity. And that's not true. And it's very much not true. And so, let's see, it starts on on 13. One proceeds to search for evidence of a religious life in the child that is configured to the adults, where intellect and will predominate. If such a configuration is not detected, it must mean that there is no religious life. From such a perspective, it would seem that in the relationship with God, only the adult is someone, and the child, in effect, is no one. I think that we naturally do this as adults. We assume that if they are not expressing their religious, spiritual potential the way that we do as adults, that they don't have one. And what we just read on the other page about how they express through words, through prayers, through, if we can hone our eyes a little bit more to see their expression, then we can see that it does exist, that it is already there.
What struck me, well, one of the many things that struck me, is the reminder that even though this child is older and has different capacities and does have this ability to have conversation, to even read and write, the child still needs for the themes to be essential and to be unified. There is a risk for many of us because the child is older and has the capacity for more things to give them more stuff. And she says that we do not multiply the themes. We continue to offer this essentiality in what we offer, quality, not quantity.
Yeah.
And this need to avoid superficial knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah, so not multiplying the themes, but multiplying the next paragraph talks about like what I want to multiply are those things that help someone to stop and linger. And so sometimes that might not even be, and like it might just be making space for something to happen or holding space. But that, how do we invite that stopping and the lingering? What are the tools that can make that happen more often?
Right. So that the tools we would consider multiplying, but not the themes.
Yeah. I think that would be a good, when we're like, oh, should I put this in my atrium? Like we could ask ourselves, is it going to help? Is it going to help them stop and linger?
Yeah, I would say that is one of the biggest struggles of the second plain child catechist is attending to too many themes.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, losing essentiality.
Because we get excited.
Yeah.
It's not too difficult for the catechist work. It's like, that is the child's work, not the catechist work. I think where we see the multiplication of the tools is with the materials. We have the repetition with variety.
Right.
Where we have so many different materials and ways of exploring the same theme. And then we not only have that, but we have the ability to revisit using the spiral method past themes.
Right. That's the trick. And to follow the child within that, right? So we can give a few examples of ways that they can stop and linger over that theme through different potential projects or works that they could do. But let them decide, like that's that second plain child. They're so creative. They want to come up with their own ideas.
Yes, I always try and make that point of like, oh, well, how could you work with this further? Instead of like, before I tell you all the tools that I have, like what ideas are bubbling in your head?
Yeah. I remember Kathy Yohani saying something like that in a past podcast where she would just bring in a material like a roll of butcher paper and say, I wonder what you could do with this.
Yes.
I wonder what you could do with this to help you think more about what we talked about today.
Yes. My son, a catechist at our church, when he was in the atrium, she brought in a roll of packing tape because she knew it would spark his interest. And I have his Red Sea, parting of the Red Sea thing that he made out of with the packing tape and cardboard. Just how he was inspired. He wanted to tell. He made it waterproof with the packing tape. But you pull a lever, and the sea parts. So, but here's a story from my atrium that I can't. It was last year that I had this child who he got inspired. He wanted to do a shadow puppet thing of one of the parables, and he had the whole thing planned out, but he couldn't figure out how to hold up the puppets that he had, the kind of the silhouettes that he'd cut out. And so I had like, well, I'll pay attention to this in my week. And I had found something that I thought I could bring in that we could use. And then I forgot it. And so we just did a little field trip to the parish office. Hey, we're looking for something. And that would help us do this thing. And the parish secretary came out with coffee stir sticks, and we were like, it was like so elated, but it was kind of like, oh, we went on the field trip and found something that would serve him, and just watch him to his shadow puppet thing, that kept him busy and really helped him dive into the scripture a little bit more each week.
That's really awesome. That's so creative. And I bet they will always remember that they did that. And if you would have suggested that, it wouldn't have had the same effect.
That's what I was just getting ready to say. I love how this was a natural response of the child that day. And as much as it bore so much fruit, that exact response will never be repeated again.
No, yes. We should not all go and tell the children in our atrium, you know what you could do with this is shadow puppets.
Right.
It would never happen.
Let's go get some coffee stirs.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that it's making the space for that and the movement of the Spirit within the person.
Trust. That goes back to that trust.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciated in the introduction how she talked about ecumenism and how, she's going to talk about that in the conclusion of this book. So we'll speak about it when we get there. But she pointed out that ecumenism is not separate. It's not a separate theme, but it needs to be present in every moment of our catechesis as a vital sap that constantly flows through the veins of catechesis. I love this. And I think this speaks so much into who Sophia was and her work in interfaith dialogue and also our work and how ecumenical it is. One flock, one shepherd. But that it's not this separate characteristic of who we are, that it must be present in every moment of catechesis. This unity, that we are the one true vine, we are one flock, right? This integratedness that the second plane child craves. They crave that unity, that interdependence, right? The community that they so easily fall into. They need that.
Mm-hmm.
She has another great quote on the second to last page of the introduction. She says, "We ask ourselves if God could be so poor that there could be only one pathway, that of the adult, for establishing and maintaining a viable relationship with him. Might not the pathway of the child open unknown perspectives of the religious world, capable of enriching us as adults? Can only the adult be a theologian? In the same sense that Evangelio Pontico has given to the term, a theologian is one who prays. Is there not also a theology of early and later childhood?" I love it. Such respect to the child as a deep theologian,
Yes.
right? And that they have something to offer us.
Also, if as the introduction is coming to an end, she speaks of her collaborators and names Gianna Gobi and speaks of many others, but not by name. But then goes right directly into naming the children as the collaborators.
Yeah, as you say that, she talks about in that section that in the book she can't write I, that it's it's all that she can only talk
We.
about it as. She's persisted in the use of we, and I'm like, as you talk, highlight that she's also considering the children her collaborators. I think the invitation, as you read the rest of the book, might be when you read that we, that, to consider it's the adult and the child together. I think I will play around with that as I read it.
And it goes right back to the subtitle that you brought to our attention, Joann. A description of an experience.
Yeah.
Not a textbook, not a how-to.
Right. And she even says earlier in the introduction, the primary intention is not to propose this program, but to share what we have glimpsed of the relationship between God and his creatures. Yeah. So that is that description of an experience. She's not proposing a program. She's telling us what she saw and has witnessed with the child. What about chapter 1? What stood out to you from that chapter?
I think it's so lovely that she just begins with the questions, and that the human person, has these spiritual questions, where the first plain child doesn't necessarily articulate them, but I do remember as a child, it's like, well, who made God? And those, having those deep kind of questions. So, and that we can say which are there are ones that, are often, everybody seems to ask, or many children, struggle with this or that, wrestle, or, look at this question.
Yeah, I definitely think they're universal questions that a lot of children ask. And I find that they're interesting because so many of them surround the idea of solitude. Like they're concerned with, well, who was with God at the beginning? Was he by himself? And even where is grandmother? It's almost like a concern for loneliness. Like, wait, who else was there? They need that community, right? And so their questions, that's at least what I heard in these questions, is so many of them felt like they're concerned for a lack of community.
I also think it's important to remember that some of the children are very verbal with these questions. And some of the children wonder about these big ideas silently in bed at night. So, we know they're there even if we don't hear them. So we give them work to help them to contemplate these big questions, and also we help them to see that in the history of humanity that people started asking these questions of existence.
So they're not alone in this curiosity.
Right.
Yeah. And who of us ever really ever comes to the answer? It's not like I can answer who is God.
Right.
and and so I think that's what I love about our work, is that, we get to, continually contemplate these questions, and, and continue to expand and grow how we might answer them. Turn the facet of the jewel and look at a new section of it.
Right. And also modeling this idea of just living in the question.
Yeah. I think that's a really great advice for parents, because I think a lot of parents were intimidated by these questions because, like you said, there's not an answer to them. So you almost, there's the potential to feel like you are doing a disservice by not being able to answer your child's question. But what this method what this work has taught us is that to lean into just the question. It's okay to be like, that's a great question. I wonder, who is God? Or I wonder, was God by himself? Let's look at this scripture. What does this tell us? What does this tell us? And not necessarily putting a period at the end of that answer, just a ... almost, like let's keep wondering together about this. That draws us into the heart. But I think that's great advice for parents, that's how you can answer any of those questions. Like, why did Jesus have to die? Like, I wonder, like, why? What do we have that could help us with this? What resource do we have that might help us answer that or explore that further, right? We don't have to answer it, just ponder it together.
Yes, just acknowledging the question. Well, so many people have wondered about that.
Yeah.
That's a great response. And to like she said in the introduction, allow the child and their spirituality, their religious capacities to be a model to you as the adult. So these questions are so pure and beautiful. But we as the adult, we stop asking them. So when our 7-year-old says, where is grandma who has died? Allow that to be a pause for us as well to, oh yeah. Let me pause and think about this. They're giving you the permission. They're giving you the example of beautiful questions for us as the adults to ponder also.
Right.
I really appreciated down just 2 paragraphs down on the beginning of chapter 1, where she's talking about joy is the indicator of interior growth. That's a Marie Montessori quote. Yeah. And I was imagining in that, how cool would it be after atrium sessions for you to gather with your co-catechist and just ask that question, where did you see joy? And I think, again, that would hone our eyes to look for that. Like that is the indicator of interior growth. So where did I see joy? And she goes on to tell us the ways that it could manifest. When a child seems to be recollected, or in spellbound silence, or desire for a prolonged experience, or have unusual emotional reaction or feelings that can't be contained. Like, this joy can look many different ways. And so to tune our eyes to be able to look for, where did you see joy?
I think that is a really important thing to remember, Carrie, because just from my own experience, what you just said brought up a memory. Years ago, I was helping some parents at my school prepare a graphic flyer type thing for the school, and we were listing some of the manifestations of Montessori in children, and joy was one of the indicators. And so we had all of these pictures to choose from of children, and they were like, find one that shows joy. And I would say, how about this one? And everybody that would go, oh, no. They were wanting, like, laughing, that sort of thing. So we had to have a discussion that joy is not synonymous with fun.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And we talk about that. And even in our who we are in the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd is, I wish I could just, quote it. Actually, you know what? Rebecca does in the foreword. It says, to involve adults and children in a common religious experience in which the religious values of childhood are predominant, particularly those of contemplation and enjoyment of God. So joy, that is one of the religious values of childhood. Right? So we should be looking for that. That is definitely how their religious nature is manifested in joy. Contemplation and joy.
Yeah.
Okay, the top of page 4, I think, is really important. And I would read the whole paragraph, but I'm just going to tease it and just have everybody else go finish it because it's just that great. The child will fully receive our answer to this unexpressed question under 2 conditions. We must stay focused on the heart of the matter, and we must respond with an essentiality that matches both the essentiality of the child and the importance of the subject itself. So I think this really good, and it goes on. And I have a lot of things starred and underlined in this paragraph. The child demands this.
Yes.
But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that even the second plane child still needs essentiality to stay focused on the heart of the matter. Like you said, we can get really excited about the subject and kind of spiral out rather than spiral in. And so to stay focused on the heart of the matter and respond with essentiality. You know, like if a child asks these questions, we don't have to go into these deep dissertations of answers for them, right?
Mm-hmm. Often when we do, if we do try to do that, we end up repeating something that we ourselves had learned.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to entering into the mystery, we just repeat a pat answer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually this chapter 1 moves into talking about the mystery of death and life.
Yeah.
Specifically, it mentions the parable that we offer levels 1 and 2 children from John 12:24, with the grain of wheat. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies.
Right.
I think part of the reason she is adding a lot of material here about that parable in itself is that it was one of the newer presentations that was added to level 1 even, that was not talked about in Religious Potential of the Child originally.
Oh, interesting.
So this was a chance to, and there was so much discussion. Is this appropriate for younger children, or is this something that we hold out for the older children because it's talking about death? And the discussion turned to, we offer it simply in level 1 because the child is asking, even in level 1, why did Jesus have to die?
I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about this work that it has taught me is that children are not afraid to talk about and see death.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, we're doing them a disservice by trying to protect them from encountering it. They are not afraid of it.
Yes.
They embrace it with dignity and without fear, innately at least. And so by asking that question, it's such a good example to us. It's a good, pure, important question about death, right? And she even goes on to say they have a deep interest in even knowing what happens to the body at death. You know, the second plane child.
Right.
I don't know if I've had a first plane child ask me that question. They might. That seems like more of a second plane child question.
I remember having that question as a young child myself.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about it very concretely, though. And Sophia warns us about using euphemisms, trying to sanitize the experience of using phrases like, Grandma has gone to be with Jesus, or gone to heaven. That phrases like that can actually be more anxiety, can cause anxiety as opposed to giving comfort.
Mm-hmm. I have clear memories as a kid when my parents were trying not to talk about something because it was going to be difficult. It's like just come out. It's harder to kind of live with my grown-ups can't talk about this than it is to there's that kind of discernment, but just to say the truth simply.
Yeah, essentially.
Yes. So there's a couple places in this chapter where she speaks about how our God is a God who gives. There's one on page 3, one on page 7, and I think it was the second time I read this book. It was like, that's what I wanted the subtitle. Like, it was like, if I was going to make the subtitle, it would be like that's a theme that just runs through this book. Our God is a God who gives. And I just remember that I think the first time was I read it. I hadn't finished my formation yet, and then I didn't have a whole lot of experience offering CGS to children. And then the second time, I was like, I had a few years under my belt as a catechist, and I started. I had deeper understanding, but it was like this book just gave me so much hope for the world in this theme about the giving of God, all of the gifts that God gives us, and the connections that creates.
Yeah, that's another theme of Catechesis of Good Shepherd that I appreciate is our emphasis on God, the giver of gifts. And that's how that resonates so beautifully with the child. Well, is there anything else that y'all want to lift up before we finish today?
I love the words of the child offered at the end of the chapter. I think there's two examples, and they're both very rich.
What if we ended our podcast with one of the prayers as the closing?
I love that idea.
So Stefano's 10 years old and attends catechesis at his parish, and comes from a family that is somewhat hostile to religious expression. He's so unsettled one day, the parish priest must reprimand him severely, and afterwards he doesn't come back to the atrium. So close to Christmas, the catechist goes and finds Stefano. He returns to the atrium and he sits down at a table and writes these words. I am on my way to you, O Lord. You speak to me in the darkness. I hear an angel's song. Maybe I am being deceived by the voice of Satan. I am not a hero. I do not seek glory. I am a man seeking to walk in God's pathway. I am standing at a gate. I think and think. I have decided. It feels like there is a fire in my heart. The gates open and I enter. I see God. I have arrived. Praise God.
Amen.
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 Thank you both for looking at these chapters with me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joann.
Appreciate being with you as well.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast. If you would like to purchase your copy of the second edition of The Religious Potential of the Child for 6 to 12-year-olds, there is a link in our show notes for you to be able to purchase this book from our CGS USA store. Remember that anything that you purchase from our CGS USA store, it is supporting our work in the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. So your purchase has a purpose. This podcast is sponsored by the United States Association of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. We would like to thank all of our members because you are making this podcast possible. If you would like to become a member, or if you would like to know more about the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, please go to cgsusa.org. Thank you all for listening. We will see you in 2 weeks. Go and fall more deeply in love with God.